Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining us today, head Olympic coach, and head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils. Today, we're sitting down with Bob Bowman. Bob, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me.
To go by what's popular in the news right now. I was going to start this with one thing, but now I have to ask you about another thing. David Popovici breaks the world record in the 100 freestyle, 46.86, just went 142.97, 200 freestyle in the finals at the European Championships. So just from your perspective as a coach who's worked with incredible 200 freestylers. You worked with Michael, obviously, Michael Phelps. You worked with Yannick. And to see what David has done this weekend, what do you make of his stroke? What do you think works so well for David that he's able to have this incredible speed, but also carry it over 200 meters, as we just saw?
Well, he has a beautiful stroke, obviously. And I'm glad he went 142 because I told Michael last night at dinner he's going to go 142. That was like, based on his 100, I figured he'd go 42 something. He's an amazing swimmer, right? He's built like a long course swimmer, big, lanky, I think he's going to grow and get stronger. He's an excellent kick, which is absolutely mandatory for somebody who's going to do 200 meters and 100 meters, and an ability to pace, right? The thing I love most about his 100 is 24-1 coming home, right? Only 22.7 going out. He didn't win the start. He was way back on the start, actually, right? But he comes off that wall, and his velocity, the first 15, is amazing, coming back on the second 50. So he knows how to pace and use his energy. And I think that's what makes a great 200 freestyler as well. So he knows how to not only go for a race, but go for it in a way so that he uses his energy effectively over the entire distance.
Do you feel like there is something to be said for not only his age, but his musculature and his physicality right now as a 17-year-old versus maybe a more matured male who is swimming that event, who has more muscle? Can you compare and contrast that? Because again, you've worked with elite level freestylers who were elite at a very young age.
He reminds me, of Michael at a very young age because they were built similarly, right? Really skinny little guys. And I'm going to say he's a little guy, but you know what I mean? He said it himself. I'm a skinny legend, right? Is that, so they're generating speed by reducing drag, right? Which is the best way to do it anyway, not to just power through it. So I feel like as he matures, he can add strength to what he's doing, but he'll still need to keep that sort of shape in the water to maximize his ability. But it's exciting to watch, and he has a great mindset. Haven't been around him much, but I have a little bit at the meets. I've met him a couple of times, and he just has an amazing way that he approaches things mentally. You can tell just observing him that he doesn't go over the top, and he doesn't get really fired up. I mean, he's fired up, but it's not visible, right? He's intense, but not tense. I love to see that in a swimmer.
I remember the first time I talked to him, and I was pretty floored at his maturity. I think he was 15 when the first time I talked to him. I was just like, you're 15, you're talking to me like someone in college or he was very mature, and you could tell his mental game was there.
Exactly.
So I had to get your perspective on that, because 142.9, we've only seen that twice, and that was 13 years ago. So the reason, or one of the reasons I called you, at least,
right.
Regan Smith announces she's going pro. She's moving to ASU to train with you. Can you give us some insight as to just your relationship with Regan leading up to this decision, and ultimately what led up to it for you?
Right. I had no relationship with Regan leading up to this decision. Zero. I mean, we were on the Olympic team last summer, and I maybe said, good swim or good morning, kind of that was literally it. Like, we didn't really know each other at all. So it was kind of surprising when this whole thing started a little bit for me. So when they reached out, because of her position at Stanford and trying to, certainly respect everything that went on, everybody involved in that, it was quite a long process of NCAA, ASU, Stanford compliance to even get to a point where Regan and I spoke. That was probably a month worth of stuff before we even ever had contact. Then we did have an in-depth conversation, right? But very in-depth. During that conversation, it was clear to me that she was going to make a change, right? She had decided that she needed something different. And I think the distinction here is different's not necessarily better, right? You know what I mean? It's not like she wasn't saying, wow, Stanford I've got to leave here. She's like, I just think there's something else I need, right? And this happens quite a bit. And if you coach long enough, it's going to happen. It's happened to me many times. Swimmers come and they leave. More have left me than come. So I'm very experienced in this. But every time it happens, it's usually for a reason and a good reason. When you look back on it, when you're going through it, it's very difficult and emotional. And, you think, what could we do better? And that's always a good thing to think about what you could do better. But I think in hindsight, people going where they feel like they'll do the best is a good thing, and in the long run, more people will come and more people will go. As coaches, we're the constant in this equation, right? Nobody I coached 30 years ago is still going. New swimmers come, new swimmers go. I'm here. Volunteers come and go, right? The official, all of these things are sort of transitory, but the coaches are kind of the one constant. So you're going to have to learn how to deal with this if you're going to coach. But back to Regan. So we had a talk, and I just basically explained what we do, right? And I had spoken with Mike Parado. I'm good friends with him. So I kind of have a good feel for what they do in training, did there. And, he had talked to Regan and felt like what we would do might be a good fit. So, that was sort of the genesis of our conversation. And once we had that conversation, I just basically spelled out what we do. There would be an option for her to come here if she wanted to and felt like that was right, but she and Greg needed to work that part out. So that's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that conversation, what do you feel like Regan will gain from being at Arizona State, or what do you feel like you can add, or what is that something different that you can provide to her training?
Well, I think there are a couple things. Number one, she's going to take school off the table, right? So that's one thing. I think Regan realizes that she's at a place in her life that is, a window of time where she can achieve some things in this sport. And she's going to set school aside and just focus on that. So there's that part of it, which I think, see how it works. But usually they're motivated, it can work. I think that sort of the way that we arrange our practices will be somewhat better for her. She's a 200 butterflyer. We do pretty well with that. 2 back should follow from there. I haven't had a lot of backstrokers, but I think that's because I haven't had a lot of backstrokers. It's just whoever's there, right? You can coach backstroke now. Well, no, not really. They're swimming it. Well, maybe I can a little bit. So I think that would be good. I think one of the things that people might misconstrue about our program is that, our volume, I feel, is moderate, right? It's not 10,000. I mean, I don't know. Dylan Gravely goes 10,000, right? And he begs to go more. We just give him 10,000. But, we probably go 7, but the intensity of it's very high. We could go 7,000 in an hour and a half. And if we do go 8, which I've done a few times this year, not many, but it's in an hour and 40 minutes. We're done. We don't spend a lot of time training. I don't train for 2.5 hours ever. If you go over 2 hours, I think you're just not being efficient, but that's my personal belief. So I think that's kind of what she was craving, was the work that's sort of intense, not a lot of rest. We don't spend any time on the wall. The biggest complaint I get from my guys is like, what? We got 1 minute between sets. I'm like, well, I wish it was 30 seconds, but yeah, you get a minute because that's where the clock kind of came. So we keep it moving. And I think that was one of the things she was really looking for. Yeah.
Interesting. So thank you for that clarification. I think
Sure.
that is kind of a
Everybody thinks I do huge mileage, right? I definitely do 10-400s, but if we do it, it's in the context of probably a practice is an hour and a half long because the intervals are relatively short, And then there are some days where we go hundreds on 8 minutes. So I don't think the extremes on any side are really good, right? You want to kind of be in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. So you touched on it, but Regan moves to train with Bob Bowman, and everyone's like, she's going to be a tuner flyer now, which obviously she's already has great tuner fly. She won an Olympic medal in the event. But Mel tells this story all the time, and so I have to bring it up. He's like, one day he was talking to you, and he was like, Bob, if you were training me, Mel Stewart, for the tuner fly, what would you have done? And you said you would have trained him like a 400 freestyler. So are there going to be certain emphasis events in her training from your perspective? Are you going to train her like a 400 freestyler, or are you going to train her like a 200 butterfly?
I think she's the world record holder in 200 back. We should not forget that. 203,
exactly.
Right? It's
203.
Crazy. And I haven't even discussed this with her, but what I plan to do is kind of what we did with Zach Pody, right? He went 44-1 in 100 backyards. On the days where the other guys would do threshold work freestyle, he just did the same sets backstroke. So she'll be doing some of that. Not like for a ton, but one day a week, she might be able to go a 3,000 set of backstroke, sometimes on short rest, but at varying intensities, And I think that would be something that would fill the part of her being a 400 freestyler, right? It would kind of work in that way. I'm not sure she needs to go a lot of long distance free. I don't think that's in the plan.
Fair enough. Yeah. Which to me makes sense, at least. So then in the spectrum of this ASU Pro Group, obviously Regan announced, and then Chase Kalisz, Jay Litherland, Sierra Schmidt, they all are like, hey, we're joining the party too.
That was completely unplanned, by the way. It was not. I know it looks like it was. I was like, I literally saw that the press release. I didn't know Regan was going to announce that day. I knew a press release was going to come out, and it came out. So I was like, okay. And then I looked on Instagram, and Chase had his up. And then it just kind of kept going from there. So it was like, I allow them to just do that on their own.
Sure. Which makes sense, but that was funny to see. It was like, whoa, one after the other. So, you last year you were operating with this relatively smaller pro group. You had Haley, Olivia Smaligo, Ryan Held. And so with this bigger pro group, will that change the look of the day-to-day operations and training of ASU for you?
I don't think it's going to change it too much because they're going to be folded into some groups, right? There will be some separate time that they are, and there'll be times when they're with other groups. So it's not just going to be me. It's going to be Herbie. It's going to be Rachel. It's going to be Logan, Derek. All of them at some point are going to be part of this. Because one of the things that I have learned the hard way twice, I did it 1 year in Michigan, I did it my first year here, it is impossible to do a pro group completely separate from a college team. So you have to be able to have the whole thing work together. And to do that, you got to get these NCAA waivers, and we've got them. All this stuff works, right? But, you can't do college practice hour and a half, pro practice 2 hours, college practice 2 hours, pro practice after. I mean, you can, but it takes 5 years off your life in 1 year. You're just, and somebody's always suffering, right? You're like, well, which one am I just going to kind of do? And which one am I going to really get going in? So we want to have them in the environment, number one, because I think it helps the college team to be around them clearly, right? To raise the level of what we're doing. And number two, it's better for them to have the competition and have coaches who are fresh enough to make it happen, to pay attention.
Yeah. So obviously you have relationships with some of these swimmers, and then maybe not so much as others. So what, specifically you said it, you want your college swimmers to see how they operate, to be able to race them. But what do you feel like these swimmers in particular of Chase, Jay, and Sierra will be bringing to that group?
Well, Chase and Sierra are obviously NBAC alums, so we know them from way back. So they know the system. They know what we like to do, the style of training. Chase has been pretty successful with it. So, Chase on a daily basis will challenge Leon in practice, which is important. Keep him honest. That's very, very important. Jay, same thing. I've worked with Jay over the years at Olympic team, national team, training camps, altitude, that kind of stuff. So Jay will come in and be a person who shows these guys how to consistently work. He's all the Georgia kids, we speak the same language. Jack and I did this for years and years and years. So I think that's important. Sierra, much the same. Sierra's a distance swimmer, so she'll spend a lot of time in our distance group, hopefully raising the level, particularly with some women distance swimmers we have that I think need to learn what it's like to consistently, swim at a level in practice. So that's what they'll bring. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Bowerly obviously retired this year. I just from a glance, it seems like, that might be the reason Chase and Jay are making a change. Can you just tell me a little bit about that relationship you and Jack had? Because it always seemed like you guys had a great rapport. You had athletes kind of coming back and forth in terms of some would go to a training camp and then you would coach them, or Jack would coach your swimmers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Our relationship started way back when I was at Michigan, 2004. And we kind of got to know each other in the Olympics in 2000, around that whole time, right? So 2004, I started going to altitude in Colorado Springs, and Jack asked to send some people with me. He'd be like, could we have, and back then it was like Peter Verhoff, Carolyn Joyce, it's like, it goes way back. We actually, this summer at a camp, Chase was up there for the World Camp, right? To get ready for Worlds, and we were up there. And we put a list up of all the Georgia swimmers who had been to one of my altitude camps, and it was 28 people. It was ridiculous. Mark Nilla, Billy Krieger. It just goes on and on and on. And they're all great. They fit right into what we're doing. They train the strokes. They were hard work. You'll never meet more polite kids. So Jack and I, did that. Obviously, we shared when I was club coach, sent him Allison, Chase, Annie Zhu. I had several swimmers go to Georgia and do quite well. So we have that too. But we're great friends and we speak the same language. I go back to the story before trials. Jack it happened like 2 or 3 times, which is crazy, right? Jack would say, hey, what are you doing this morning? This is what I've got. And he would send me a picture of his practice or no, it was the day before. He'd say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow morning. Here's what I'm thinking. And it would be what we were doing. It would be the exact same thing. I'm like, well, I can't help you here because we're on the same page. Maybe we ought to call Troy or something. I don't know, and figure out what to do. But like, it was crazy because Jack and I are very similar in the way we arrange a training week, and in some of the sets we like to do. We like 400 IM, so those things go together.
That's pretty wild to have it happen more than once.
Oh yeah, definitely more than once.
Wow. So yeah, that's always something that was like kind of fun to hear about. Just like, oh, these Georgia kids are going up, and Bowman will be at that altitude camp. But it's super cool to see that pipeline continue now,
exactly,
even with his retirement.
It's decades long now, right? It's like a historical thing. Crazy.
Seriously. Okay, so keeping it in the IM realm. I want to talk about Leon and the summer he had after coming off of his short course season, off his NCAAs, where it kind of comically enough, he broke this long-standing record in the 200 IM, and then the 400 IM, he went really, really fast, but someone else got that record, right? So when you see a short course performance like that, obviously it's easy to see him having success in long course. But coming off of NCAAs, what did you do to ensure that was carried over?
Right. Well, first, I'll tell you, you get a laugh out of this. If there was one thing I was sure of in my life in the past year, is that Leon was going to win the 400 IM at NCAA. That was it. I was like, I don't think he's got speed 100%. Enough for a 200. Probably can't do breast or fly. He has 100% winning that 400. So there's a good life lesson, folks. You actually have to swim and do it, And he can't. the best part about Leon is he came up after, and very similar to Michael, he had already got critiqued. He was like, I didn't take it out. And I'm like, no, you didn't. That was it. That was all we needed to know. You got to go for it, right? You can't just wait around for somebody to like be with you. You have to take the race out. But anyway, that was a good lesson for everyone and expectation. But what we did was, he adapted very well to our program in the fall, I felt like, right? And I was very careful in how we approached it. And, one of the things that kind of ties into what we talked about earlier, Yannick, right? I learned so much from training Yannick, particularly after he left, because I had to go back and look at what we did and what I might do differently. And I used all of those lessons with Leon because, frankly, culturally, French swimmers are a little bit different than Americans, right? And I was always so what I did was I made everything certainly challenging. But if he met the challenge, I didn't immediately raise it to the next level. I let him kind of stay there for a little bit, and then I would raise it. You kind of get swimmers like Yannick and Michael, they're like machines sometimes. You'll give them something ridiculous, and they'll do it, and you're like, okay, well, let's do this. and some of them can take it, and some of them, even Michael would at some point, he would get cranky and not do it, mainly because I was just pushing it so hard. So with Leon, I wanted to make sure it was balanced, and we did all the strokes, and we gave him enough that he would improve, but not so much that he would go over the edge. And I thought that worked quite well. And you saw he swam pretty well unshaved in our invite. I think it was 3:39 or no, what did he went faster than that, 38. We then went into the NCAA and Pac-12s. Did not really give him any rest for Pac-12s, and then because he was already qualified, and then we just sort of focused on NCAAs, and that was successful. But he had to qualify for the Worlds the week after NCAAs in San Antonio. So that was a challenge in itself. So we kind of made that happen. But what that did do was he was then ready to just focus on Worlds. And we decided he would not take a break. He was going to take a longer break at the end of the summer, which he's doing, finishing up right now. So we just went right back into training. And so he didn't really take any backward steps, and he trained very, very well for that month. Went to the camp in Canet. I went with him this time. The French were very kind to invite me to Canet, and I was like, beach in south of France. Yeah, I'm up for it. So we went, and he trained beautifully there, as well as any swimmer I've ever trained. You kind of have your plan and you set it up and you wonder if it's right. And he was just so good on every part of it. Until, here's another life lesson, coaches. I would call home and talk to my assistant Logan or Rachel, who would be like, Leon's doing really well. Gave him this set. His heart rates were this. His lactate was perfect. We did a test. Everything was right. We were going to go to Budapest on Tuesday, and on Monday, I gave him the last little kind of threshold set that he would do, right? And it's like a slam dunk. It's going to be perfect because it's just easy. It's not that hard. He struggled through the whole thing, and his heart rates were terrible, and he was clearly shook up and I was like, okay. I was like, I think it'll just be fine. You're a little dehydrated. Have some electrolytes, right? I came up with that. And he did. He's like, oh, okay. So he did. And then he just moved right along. By the time I got to Budapest, it was fine. But they never are good all the way through, coaches and swimmers. So know that. There's going to be some time where it's just for whatever reason, it's not there. And you just have to kind of not bank on the fact that it's going to be perfect. And I think I did a pretty good job of faking it. Maybe not back in my room when I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But, on the deck, I think it was okay. But that's kind of how he did it. Then he got to Worlds, and just the last 3 or 4 days, you could tell he was there. He was mentally ready, and you saw what he did. Yeah.
Yeah. We saw what he did. Were you there in Budapest? And if so, what
Yeah,
what
I was
capacity?
with the French team. I was on the French team. Yeah.
All right.
L'équipe de France. Je suis français.
What was different about, obviously you've been on a lot of Team USA teams. What was it like being on that team France? And I don't know if you were focusing on a lot of athletes or just Leon.
Well, I had Haley, right? So
Right.
trying to keep her going, keep that thing going, and did pretty well. She had a decent meet. So the odd thing was I told him I would go with the French team, and it was great because the team is really small. There were like 21 swimmers, I think. USA team's 52? Yeah, it's a big team. So it's just a different dynamic. I would say the French were always asking me, so what's the difference between USA and this? I'm like, really, it's just the size of it. You guys are doing kind of the same things. Their management was good. The hotel, Jocko does a great job. He's managing the team really well. And I think you're going to see some good results from them. But when I got to the camp, they're like, we have 4 or 5 swimmers who want to work with you in the camp and at Worlds. I was like, that seems a little strange, but hey, I'm up for it. So I did have some people that I was working with on the French team. Antoine Vicarat, the great kid, breaststroker. Some of the women, were with us. And so we had a little group that Leon trained with, which was very good. And I got to kind of get to know them and really get to know everybody on the French team and really get my French up to speed because I went back to Paris for 3 weeks after. So it was good for me to kind of, get that dialed in. So it was just a great experience, but I was basically there to, help Leon get it done. And it was nice to see.
So at the meet itself, what did you think of that 400 IM? What do you make of that?
I was actually surprised. I thought he'd go 406 and I'd be super happy with that. Mm-hmm. I was like, he'd probably go 406. And then it was just after that first 50 of breast, you're like, holy, 33.8. I was like, okay, it's on, right? Here he goes. And couldn't quite hang on in the free to get Michael, but, that's a big jump from what he'd been doing in freestyle. So that would be the next challenge.
Yeah. How do you challenge him to make that extra half second now?
I think, honestly, freestyle, he can improve quite a bit. He has some technical issues in the freestyle. I mean, he's very good in short course free because he kicks all of it, right? Most of it, right? He kicks to 15, takes a few strokes and flips, and he can hold his breath. But he's got to learn how to hold on to water a little better, particularly with his right arm. He slips a little bit. You can kind of see that when he gets going. He's a very good kicker, but he'll tend to just get really flat, something you never see Popovici or Michael do, right? They're always, their body's moving. Leon will kind of flatten out when he tries to kick really hard. So there's some things that he can definitely do to improve that. And we're going to work on that quite a bit this year because that's the next area for opportunity for improvement. Yeah.
And so then you've been through it several times, as we saw, he joined a pretty cool club, Michael and Chase having swept the IM events. After the 400, is there much you need to do to prepare him for the 200? Or you're just like, good job, keep going?
Well, the first thing we had to do was learn an important lesson, which is you don't go in the mix zone for an hour after the 400 IM and not come out. You get 3 minutes. So the French got educated. I had to, step into stern Bob mode and say, okay, come on now. Once we got past that, it was easy. He was ready to go. But he had 2 fly coming up, right? And the next thing that we wanted to look at in that meet was his double of 2 fly, 2 IM, which was going to come up, right? He's going to end up doing the final of the 2 fly and the 200 IM semi was right after. So that was kind of the next challenge, and he was really up for it, and he handled it beautifully. It was as good as any double Michael ever did, right? Went 153.3, came back, went 155, pretty short in between. We were able to manage everything in between exactly the way I wanted to. His lactate readings were just perfect on both of them. That was the best part about this thing was, I'm a big proponent of altitude training, but I think it should be done a certain way. And we're doing it to get a metabolic effect, not to kind of change up our venue or anything like that. We're going to get a very specific metabolic effect. And we're there at a certain time before the meet. We come down a certain amount of time, days before the meet. We want to see certain things in training. And it was just right there every time we did the blood testing at the meet. It was insane, actually on a higher level than Michael on some things. It was, so we know that worked. So we'll try to keep doing that as much as we can. So we got a lot out of that, but it was just kind of fun for me to kind of have somebody swimming that on that high level and do the double and kind of handle that really well. I thought that was good. And then the 2 IM final, he just kind of went for it. still some things he can do. When I say he went for it, he did the one thing that he'll do that we're going to work on is if he wants to improve something like free, he'll back off the butterfly. I'm like, dude, you're second in the world in butterfly. You don't get beat by 3 people going out in the 200. You know what I mean? Go for it. He's like, well, I wanted to finish really well. I'm like, yeah, well, you did, but you only went 155, whatever, instead of 54, maybe, you know? So he's still learning, but solid swims all around. You can't fault him for that.
Maybe it'll be by him. Maybe it'll be by someone else. It feels like the world is kind of finally catching up in that event, particularly.
Yeah.
What do you think it takes for someone to go 153 in the 200 IM?
A hell of a breaststroke, right? It's going to be a really good, because that's their upper area. Leon's area of opportunity is breaststroke, right? I go 31 in breast, right? You know, that would probably put him in the realm. You're going to have really good transitions, underwaters, and you really can't have a weak stroke, right? That's the deal. So that's what it's going to take. I mean, I think we've seen people with the speed to do it. You have to have the endurance to do it as well. So those are all factors. So I think it's going to be from somebody who does the 400 IM. That's just I always feel like it's easier to come down to it than to go up to it. Yeah.
That, especially long course, I would think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For
like
sure,
you said,
long course. Yeah.
That endurance piece is a big factor. That's interesting that you say breaststroke is his biggest opportunity, though.
Because he already does it. Yeah. I mean, I think he can get so much better. He can get so much better in breaststroke. We only found it. You'll also like this one. I told you I was kind of just trying things out all fall, right? So he's on a pretty balanced program. Some days we do some backstroke, some days block fly, some days free, IM, you know, just kind of mixing it up, and not really too heavily leaning on any aspect. Just trying to figure out what he did well in practice, you know, and those kind of things. The main thing we found out was he could kick underwater, which we really had no idea. And then he got really good at that, right? So we kind of did focus on that once we knew. But I was, you know, had seen him do some breaststroke in practice, and not great. Just okay, you know, pretty good. Like, I think the best thing he did in practice breaststroke was you guys put up that set Eddie did where they did 4 100s on a minute free and then 650 stroke. You do it like 3 times. Anyway, I just did it, right? And he did breaststroke, and on 50 seconds, he averaged 28, which I thought was pretty good. But I didn't think it was like otherworldly, right? People swim fast in practice. But in January, we were kind of doing our Thursday morning practice, which is long course. We have a single on Thursdays, 10 o'clock. And I wanted to do something suited and fast just because kind of needed to do that. And I was like, you know, it would be pretty good for Leon to do some breaststroke. So they suited up, warmed up on their own. They suited up, and the set was very, you know, ingenious. It was a 150 from a dive, 100 from a dive, and a 50 from a dive with like, you know, rest, 10 minutes rest in between or whatever, as much as they needed to kind of work through the group.
Genius.
And yeah, it was incredible. But on the 150, he was 135.3. Figure that out. And it was kind of like, I remember I'm standing there timing him, and Keenan Robinson was there because he was visiting Haley, you know, and national team people. And he was there for that practice. And I was like, Keenan, this kid is hauling right now. I was like, what is going on? And he did that. So I'm like, all right. In the 100, he was 008. And in the 50, he was like, I don't know, 28.0 or 27 something. Not great, but he didn't have a lot of 50 speed. So after that, I was like, in this dual meet with Cal we're coming up, he's going to do a 2 breasts because he hadn't even done one. And he went 154 in a brief, 154.0, and he raced Reese, you know, really good race. I think he out-touched him. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to do breaststroke now. But that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't like he just came in and was amazing at breaststroke. We just started to then focus on it. And I think long course, he just has a lot more to go because we didn't really have time to put a lot of preparation in the breaststroke in a long course perspective. So I think he could really improve that.
Yeah, that is surprising. Did not see that one coming, especially now that he is an NCAA champion.
Exactly. After that, I'm like, yeah, I think he's probably pretty good at breaststroke. We should do that.
Yeah. So moving forward, I guess, obviously he's got a home Olympics coming up in 2 years.
He does.
And obviously you've got a lot of time to choose, to narrow down things and to have a plan before then. But event wise, what are you thinking? Do you think his ceiling in Paris is 4 golds or 5 golds?
That we won't get into, but I think he can swim. I don't know how many events he can swim. What we did, the new Olympic program alleviated the double of 2 IM and 2 fly, but it created one of 2 fly and 2 breast, which I guess there aren't that many people that do 2 fly and 2 breast. So that's going to be probably a binary choice, 2 fly or 2 breast. They're just right together, and they're, prelims are together, semis are together, and the finals are really, I think, close together. So I'm not sure that's a thing. We're kind of preliminarily looking at it. The 4 IM is like, by itself, nice. 200 IM is by itself nicely. And other than that, we just have to kind of look at what we're going to do on the others. But I think he can swim. He'll be competitive in some events.
Do you think there's potential for him to be on relays? On France relays?
No, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He kind of didn't do that well in the relays that they put him on. I was a little bit disappointed. We go back to his freestyle. I think he get like 148 on their relay, I think, which is like, okay, come on. That's not, you're way better than that. So we're going to work on that. So I think he'll end up on that one. And he'll definitely end up on a medley, I think, in some capacity. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was like, with stroke.
Fly, breast. Who knows? Yeah.
We'll see. Gotcha.
Might be my backstroker this year. Who knows? 400 medley. We're trying to figure that one out.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll keep our eyes open on that one.
You never know. He kicks really well underwater. So that's a big part of it.
Right. Yeah. Luca broke the, fastest 100 backstroker in history. And he was, only swam 40 yards of backstroke.
Exactly.
So speaking of the college season, just moving forward into this 2022-23 season, give me the ASU update. What are you guys looking forward to about this season? How are you going to build on last year's success?
We're looking really forward to our freshmen coming in, as most people are, but we have great class coming in. People can look it up on SwimSwam. I'll start naming people and forget people, but very solid that way. We're not losing that much on NCAA level point wise. So I feel like we can keep that going. We have diving back, men and women, full force. So that's a plus for us. Let's go. Right. I did not cut diving. Just for the record, everybody out there.
For the record.
Did not do it. Brought it back. Revived it, I guess. Revived it. So we're excited about that. We got a great schedule. We're going to start our season out in Athens, Georgia, coincidentally. Swim in Georgia. We'll be out there. We have Wisconsin at home. So and plus our Pac-12 dual meets. So we have a really good schedule this year. So I'm excited about all that. But I do think both teams can significantly move forward. I think the women will take a bigger step, I hope, this year. So we're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, Bob, I appreciate you taking the time as always. It's great catching up with you. Any parting thoughts before we sign off today?
No, just thanks for having me. Good luck to everybody this year. It's a great time of year, right? Everybody's feeling good, optimistic, so enjoy it.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.